The 20th perek of Sefer Yehoshua is unlike any other perek in Sefer Yehoshua, and especially the last few prakim that we are learning, which is straightforward land distribution. Over here we have a little diversion of the norm of Sefer Yehoshua, and this perek discusses some of the very relevant laws pertaining to the city of refuge, the Iri Miklat. Nowadays, we no longer have these Iri Miklat. However, once upon a time, they used to have something called city of refuge. What exactly are these locations? Long story short, we have a Masechta, Maseches Makos, which discusses this. But in short, what they were was if someone accidentally killed someone else, or if someone killed someone else, but he was awaiting trial. So the murderer, or the Roitzeach, would flee to one of these city of refuges, and he would remain protected there. The people of the city would have to protect him until he underwent his trial and the verdict was in. If the verdict was it was an intentional murder, so then the punishment would be in accordance to what he did, and usually he would get killed. However, if it was determined that the murder was unintentional, accidental, then he has to remain in the city of refuge until the death of the kohen gadol. There's a lot of ideas behind this. That, in short, is what the city of refuge is. He was safe. Who was he safe from? There's something called a goel hadam, literally an avenger of the blood. This is referring to one of the relatives of the victim. And he was allowed to chase after the murderer to try to kill him. But once he was in the city of refuge, he was protected from this. That's why he would stay in the city of refuge. The Meom Loez points out and really asks a question. And we should pose the question now. Why do we have a perek in Sefer Yehoshua about this? There are 24 prakim in Sefer Yehoshua, and this is one of the prakim, only 10 psukim, relatively short. But all of these halachos are already discussed in Chumash. This is basically some of those halachos getting repeated. Why? What's the point?
Should we finish the mitzvah?
We already know it. What's the point of repeating the halachos? Just say one pasuk in another perek. Yehoshua set up these cities of refuge. What do you have to reiterate and say some of the relevant halachas? Only some of them. What's the point of all this? The Meom Loez says in the Torah itself in Chumash, these halachas are said in great detail. There's only a brief review over here. There's one halacha that's new. If you think about everything that's in the Torah about the city of refuge, there's one halacha that is missing, that is added over here. And that is when the murderer goes into the city of refuge, he has to tell the Ziknei Ha'ir, the elders of the city, what he did and explain why he's asking for protection. He has to publicly disgrace himself by confessing before them. And the Meom Loez has a little bit more length about this, actually. And this embarrassment is part of his atonement. Once he lowered himself in this way, he's afforded protection of the city. When the murderer is forced to remain there, it's a punishment and a protection. The people of the city have to protect him and not mistreat him. Now, we should point out this is all about atonement. And the Gemara in Makos says this explicitly. That's why once the kohen gadol dies, you could get out of the city of refuge, because the kohen gadol dying is an atonement. It's an atonement for the murderer and the whole generation in general. So this is a mini atonement, so to say, a minor atonement, aka when he goes in and explains to the elders of the city what he did wrong and he gets embarrassed from that. That's a partial atonement.
Such a necessary step. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu leave it out?
Yeah, that's already something else to look into. Why specifically over here? You could say that because now we are actually setting up the city of refuge, and we are saying, okay, this is what has to be done practically 4 was the general. This is more practical. Right now, this is what has to happen. Maybe you could come on to something like that. But that's this idea with the atonement. Now, something interesting with the kohen gadol, just to say a side halacha, is you could literally have a murderer who spends 2 minutes in the city of refuge and then the kohen gadol dies, versus you could have someone who's there his entire life. The kohen gadol doesn't die; he'll die in the city of refuge. Sham yekvuroso, sham yediroso, sham yekvuro. So that's something else to discuss. The Gemara actually discusses. Let's say the kohen gadol died while his case was going on before the verdict. Let's say it was after the verdict, but it was before he went in the city of refuge. So you have all these halachos which are detailed in the Gemara and Makos and the Mishnayos. But let's go back to on track over here. Why is this all repeated? How do you know this in the Torah? So the Lelmod Ulelamed explains that, in Sefer Yehoshua, we learn about a lot of battles. We learned about the battle in Yericho, about other places as well. And a lot of times what happens in war is life. People become accustomed to spilling blood, killing, and life becomes diminished in how we view life, so to say. It was necessary to remind them the importance of human life and the responsibility to prevent the avenger, the goel hadam, from carrying out revenge against one who had killed unintentionally.
Who says that?
This is brought in the Lelmod Ulelamed. Yeah, beautiful. I love the sefer. So that is one reason why some of the halachos are repeated, maybe to get this idea out. Interesting idea. I'd like to share one of my favorite halachos of the Iri Miklat, the city of refuge, in general, and in Maseches Makos, and add some insights to it based on what other rabbis say. The Gemara in Makos on Daf Yud says something very cryptic. The Gemara says on Yud and Aleph, Tana, Talmud shagalo megalin rabo imo. If a Talmud student, he accidentally murdered, and now goes to the city of refuge, he has to go. His Rebbe has to come with him. Now, the obvious question over here is that fair? What did the Rebbe do wrong? Why does he have to exile himself?
And his family.
Right, his whole family. And furthermore, they talk about how the exile is such a difficult thing. When you go to an area, you know no one. You're starting over totally new. It's such a difficult thing to do. Furthermore, let's say the Rebbe, right, he has hundreds and thousands of Talmidim. So now he has to leave the yeshiva for this one person? So the Gemara basically answers this question slightly and says, yeah. It says, V'nos el, the pasuk says, V'nos el achas ha'odim ha'elu v'chai. That he should flee to one of these cities and leave, and live. Ovid le midi dechiyuso. Do something the Gemara darshans. That is his life. It says he will live there. You have plenty of people that they're alive, they're walking, but that's not real life. You have a guy that's alive and he's just eating popcorn all day, watching movies. That's not life. That guy's also heading for depression. That's not, come on, that's not going to bring to anything good. He's not going to be satisfied. If you have someone who's learning Torah HaKadoshim, and he goes there, but he doesn't have his life, aka the Torah, he doesn't have his Rebbe, it's not even considered that he's alive. The Rambam actually elaborates on this. The Rambam in Hilchos Roseach V'Shmiras HaNefesh, in perek Zayin, the beginning of perek Zayin, the Rambam says that a Talmud without his Rebbe, it's as if he isn't alive. That's what he says. That's what he says. Because the Torah HaKadoshah is life. Talking about this Pesach, we usually don't go away, and we might be flying. Now, there's limits when you fly of weight, how much you could bring in terms of Sfarim. I said, look, there's a weight issue. I won't bring clothing. I got to bring this fire. I know what they have there, what they don't have there. The Shilas and Shuvos Meishav Dover, the Netziv writes in Chelik Beisim and Ayin Vav, I just looked it up again, relates that the essential svarim of a Talmud Chacham are considered his life. Nowadays, says the Netziv, the svarim of a Talmud Chacham are considered his rabbis and his life.
And you can't access it on Yantif if it's on a computer.
You don't have the Otzer. You know what the Ritva says? The Ritva says that the Talmud Rebbe has to go with him to the Iri Miklat, the city of refuge, even if there's already yeshiva there, there's other rabbis. You know why? Says the Ritva, an incredibly insightful line, which I think about all the time. Loy min hakol zoicha lelmod. As the Gemara in Avodah Zarah says, a person can't merit learning Torah from everyone. Certain people, they have different ways of presenting the information and giving it over, different content. Also svarim. People connect to different svarim differently, same idea. Therefore, I think that these ideas all together shed some light, on on why the Rebbe goes with the Talmud to the...
So the ritual was if there's no yeshiva, if there is a yeshiva?
Even if there's a yeshiva, because you're not going to be social and forever. They talk about the Rebbe doesn't need to stay there forever. You could, travel,
Maybe you could
go in and out, commute, right? They talk about... There's a beautiful Dumna Magid on this. Once upon a time, there was a blind man. Suma choshev kemeis. And he would travel to earn a livelihood. He would try to do what he could to make money. He always had a friend that accompanied him to help him navigate exactly where to go. After all, he can't see. Whenever they traveled beyond the borders of his country, the blind man always had a safe conduit passport that showed that he could come and go whenever he wanted. He could return. One day when he returned from a journey abroad, the two were stopped and officials demanded to see their papers. The blind man showed them his pass and the officials then asked for a similar pass for the guide. The blind man said his guide didn't need a pass, but the officials disagreed and insisted that nothing in his papers included the name of his guide. The blind man said to the official, "Please read what's written on the passport." And he read slowly, quote, "This certifies that the bearer of this document, who is blind, is permitted to travel about both in this country and abroad in pursuit of his livelihood." The blind man said, "This is the answer to your question. My passport recognizes the fact that I'm blind and that I travel to pursue my livelihood. How could a blind man travel without a guide? Naturally, in any passport like this, a guide is included by implication," said the blind man. Explains the Dubna Magid, the Rebbe who accompanied his Talmud, the unintentional murderer, to the city of refuge, was an integral part of his Talmud's life, like the guide was to a blind person. In other words, a Talmud without his Rebbe is like a blind person. The Rebbe is an essential worker, so to say, and he needs to come to the city of refuge, to the Iri Miklat.
I don't know how that works now. It would work nowadays with technology. You'll be able to talk to your Rebbe.
Yeah, okay. That's what the discussion. Probably still not the same. That's like someone who just zooms in, but he's not here in person. Ein Adoma, it's incomparable. Being in the same environment, the same area. We know that there's a Gemara in Chagiga, Daf Gimel, the Chedushi HaGaonim, that they talk about. You see the body and you see everything, and they talk about it. And see over there, that source.
Agreed.
I gotta make sure that thing is typed up. That it's actually a beautiful shot. I think it's somewhere in the parsha. I'll figure it out because I'm reviewing everything. Anyways, that being said, let's actually roll through over here this perek. Let's see if we can do it. I think we could do it in less than 10 minutes. Relatively straightforward. The perek itself begins by opening up and saying, "Vayedaber Adonai el Yehoshua lema," that Hashem spoke to Yehoshua saying. And now these are the halachos that are going to be discussed over here. Daber el bnei Yisrael lema. Hashem told Yehoshua, "Speak to the Jews, saying, Tenu lachem Es odi hamiklat asher dibarti aleichem biyad Moshe. Give them the cities of refuge that I spoke to you through the hands of Moshe, through Moshe that I spoke to you. Next passage continues and says, Lanos shama, to flee over there. To flee over there, roitseach maka nefesh, a murderer, someone who killed someone else bishkaga, accidentally, but bli das, without knowledge. So, a whole discussion what the difference is between accidentally and without knowledge. A lot of explanations on that one.
Without knowledge, what do you
that
mean?
as well. What?
Without knowledge, what does that mean? Shuggy amazing or what?
It's accidental. So that's the question. What's the difference between
What's
accidentally
without knowledge? Without knowledge means what?
that you didn't realize it? That's what
You
the
didn't
Gemara
realize
discusses.
you didn't realize that you were going to kill someone.
Kind of. The Gemara, look at the beginning of the second perek of Makos in the Bavli.
Okay,
V'hayu lachem lemiklat goel hadam. And he's going to be able
manslaughter.
to flee there. He's going to be able to flee there from the avenger of the blood. Pasuk continues and says, V'nos el achas miha'orim ha'elu. And he shall flee to one of those cities, va'amad pesach shara here. And here's the new halacha, by the way. And he should stand by the entrance of the gate of the city. V'diber ba'azne zikni ha'ir hahi. And he should speak in the ears of the elders of that city, as the vod of his words. V'osvu oiso ha'ir aleim v'nosnu l'makom v'yoshev imam. And they should gather him into the city, and they should give him a place, and he should dwell among them. Okay. Next passage continues then. V'chi yirdoif. Goel hadam achorah v'lo yaskiru esech biyado. Let's say you have the avenger of the blood. He runs after the murderer, and they don't give the murderer to his hand. This word yaskiru is an interesting word, which already the Mitzudos Sion, as it usually does, provides us the translation inyan mesira. This is referring to giving over. This is what the Mitzudos Sion does best. He's basically a dictionary, and then he likes quoting other psukim where a similar word comes up. If it does, unless it's a super duper rare word that only shows up once. So they're not going to give him over the murder. Ki bebli das hiko esraeu, because it was without knowledge that this murderer hit his friend. And he didn't hate him yesterday or the day before yesterday. The Gemara Makos discusses if someone killed his enemy, he will not go to the city of refuge because we can assume that he killed him purposely.
So he's telling the goel adam that he can't kill him?
Yeah, these are the people of the city preventing that from happening.
Oh, this is in the city itself this is after he gets into the city.
Even if he gets in, they're not going to give him over. They're going to protect him.
Okay, once he's in.
Once he's in. They talk about if he steps outside the city. Also, they discuss if you have a tree and the tree is in the city, but the branches and leaves are outside of the city, and you're still under that tree, is that considered in or out of the city? Or if the tree is outside of the city, but some of the tree... Yeah, exactly. So you have very interesting halachos. What is considered exactly the boundaries of the city? The next passage continues and says, "Vayoshev ba'ir hahi ad amdoi lifnei ha'eda lemishpat ad moisa kohen gadol asher yeh biyamim ahin." Here it is, one of the well-known halachos, that he will sit in the city and remain there until he stands before the congregation to get judged, meaning before the verdict is in, that's where he waits buffer time. And if he's found guilty, he stays there ad moisa kohen gadol until the kohen gadol dies, asher yebiyam mahin, which exists in that day. As then, once the kohen gadol dies, yashuv haroitseach uba el iro, the murderer returns and he comes back to his city where he's from. Vel based onto his house. El ha'ir asher nas misham, to the city that he fled from. V'yakdishu. This word is an interesting word. That means that they designated. The Mitsuda Sion says v'yazminu. They prepared. They prepared. They designated. Same idea.
It was a targum. So
Targum?
it was a
Yeah.
targum.
Yeah. V'zaminu. Targum also has it correct. What does Targum say? Actually, now that you mentioned that on the
Vayasgiru, yeah.
V'yazgiru and Hey. Adi Yurdov Gol Dama Batraya Velo Yimserun. Yeah, same thing. They didn't give over. Yeah, sometimes just easier to go to Targum. He's just right up there. Okay. V'yakdishu es Kedesh Bagalil Bahar Naftali. They designated a place called Kedesh in the Glil on the mountain of Naphtali, Shechem Bahar Ephraim, and Shechem, which is by the mountain of Ephraim, Kriyas Arba Hi Chevron Bar Yehuda. And they also designated Kriyas Arba, which is Chevron on the mountain of Yehuda, part of Chevron. Ume'ever Yarden, on the other side of the Jordan River, Yericho Mizracha, they have Yericho over there from the east. Nosnu as Betzer Bamidbar, they put a place called Betzer in the desert, Bamishor. Mishor, I think it's translated as the straight plains.
Usually a Mishnah is like plain.
Yeah, in the plain, that's how they designate it. Mater Reuven, for the tribe of Reuven. Ve'esra Amois Bagilad, and Ramos and Gilad, Mate Gad, from the tribe of Gad. Ves Golovon or Golon, but Bashan and Mata Menashe, and Golan and Bashan from the tribe of Menashe. Okay, then the pasuk concludes, only 9 psukim. Elu hayu iri hamu oda. These are the cities that were basically appointed. This also is an interesting word that's being used. Hamu oda. It's interesting. The Targum over here doesn't have a test. No, it's right over here. This is already the next parak, which is interesting. Yasser Moshe Begil Meshifted the God V'Yaskol and Dezamin Lakol Bnei Israel Uligirura Di Yizgarum Bnei Harn Merak Taman Kol Diyiku Nefesh B'Shalovim. Interesting. These are the cities that are appointed Lakol Bnei Israel for all the Jews, V'Lager Hagar, and for the convert that is dwelling B'Soicham among them, Lanush Shama, to flee over there, to run there, Kol Mak and Nefesh B'Shkagu, whoever kills someone accidentally, V'Yomos Be'ad goel hadam and Abdul Lifnei Eda, he will not get killed by the avenger of the blood. So, you have a Masechta on this. There are limited Masechtas in Shas, and yet Chazal felt that they should have a full Masechta, basically, on false witnesses, Eidim Zoymimin, which a lot of the Masechta deals with the city of refuge. Takes up space in Shas. So, important concept. A lot more to learn on this. These are some points on this. Any questions, comments on this?
So the Gemara quotes this parak for some of the halachos and makas.
I think it's primarily from Chumash, if I'm not mistaken, but some are definitely quoted from here. Yes.
Gemara brings down this thing about speaking to the tzaddikim. I forgot about halachos.
Yeah. Speaking to the tzaddikim, that specific halacha, can't recall, but I think this pasuk, this might be, some of these are quoted, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So, basically, story is after this parak, only 4 more to go. That's it. 4 more in the whole Sefer Yehoshua. So, very exciting. Sefer Shoftim, of course, is absolutely packed. A lot of stuff. If you could make something out of nothing over here, for sure over there. Yeah, but most of Yehoshua is packed. It's just the land distribution is more straightforward. Anyways, so
I have a question about Meom Loez.
yeah.